Welcome, everyone, to the Win Now podcast, hosted by Deborah Byrd, founder and CEO of Plug and Play SM.
I am so excited for today's show, so let's go.
And then myself, Todd Bookspan, founder of Win by Noon.
It's also important to make it so easy and simple for them to remember, and that's where we sometimes overcomplicate our scripts or our messaging, or we try to be too clever, and it's like clear beats clever every time.
Last week's failure is last week's failure, right? There's nothing you can do there. And I hate to say it, if I had a bad closing last week for something that was or wasn't my fault, not like the world knows. It wasn't on the 6 o'clock news, right? I know, so it's a dent to my confidence. But the next person that I'm going to talk to has no freaking clue. It's not always what you say. Sometimes it's how they hear it. Hey, I'm Todd Bookspan. This is another episode of the Win Now podcast. Founder of Win by Noon, joined by my good friend, founder of Plug and Play SM, Deborah Byrd.
Hello. Happy almost mid-year. Can you believe that? We're halfway.
It is crazy. I was just telling my daughter that this morning, and I love when you and I brainstorm about an episode that we're going to have. And here we are mid-year and really recircling to what one of the tenets that started this whole podcast, which is communication, right? You and I are super passionate about exactly what to say. We're both Phil Jones certified guides, and I always love it because you always say it's not necessarily what you say, but it's what they hear.
What they hear, and then even further, what they remember. I think the statistics are people remember about 2% after 2 weeks of what you tell them, which is exactly why you should be posting more frequently, even if it feels like you're saying the same thing in different ways over and over. We have so many things coming at us at once that our brain can only hold so many things. So it's important to have repetition, but it's also important to make it so easy and simple for them to remember and be able to retell to a partner or a friend. And that's where we sometimes overcomplicate our scripts or our messaging, and we just make it too complex. Or we try to be too clever, and it's like clear beats clever every time.
I love that. And I think it's also people are looking for the magic script, and it's not a script. It's actually being present, listening, communicating, and being curious, I think are such important parts of it. And I think part of it's is energy and enthusiasm. I don't know if you're an Andy Andrews fan at all. Funny, I haven't said that name in a while, but I love Andy. He just shows up and he does a really good job of, one is he reminds me that it's important to talk slow because he's from the South and he's got that drawl and he talks. But I really remember him talking once about literally if you have a smile on your face, they can hear it through the phone. And I feel like that's where it starts. If you're comfortable and got a smile on your face, and that's going to lead some of the confidence to have a better conversation.
So let's dive into that a little bit further, how you show up and how that can sometimes intersect the meaning or meaning of your messages being sent. What have you seen just from your own coaching group or maybe even people on your team? What are we doing wrong where the how gets in the way?
One of it is I think we overthink it, right? We have call reluctance, we're hesitant, and we are allowing the unimportant to get away of actually just doing our job and creating the time and the space for the conversations. So we're trying to squeeze them in, or they're random, they're not well thought out, and then it feels rushed, I think, when you're there. That's just kind of my initial gut. What do you think?
I think it goes back to doing the work before the work so that you can be fully present in the conversation and this is just my experience from some of the newer LOs that I've worked with, where they feel like they've memorized the quote magic script, like you said, but they could literally say the same thing that you say. It's just how they're rushing it, or maybe the eye contact's not there, or you can almost hear it in their tone that they're just trying to get through that last sentence because that's what it said to do on their sheet, although they're not realizing by the body language and the cues from the other person of either it's going way over their head or they don't want to hear your thesis on how interest rates work. They're just trying to see, do they even credit qualify? And you're kind of peacocking a little bit and they're like, I have no idea what you just said. So it's part of not doing the work before the work, and that includes doing some homework on who you're about to talk to, whether that's a real estate agent or maybe it's a listing appointment, and making sure that you can be where your feet are at that time.
So when you say homework, what do you mean by that? Because I personally, if I'm going to someone says, hey, you should call Deborah Byrd, I'm not the one who's going to do a Google search or a perplexity search
You're
on you, but
not?
I know other
You
people
don't
who
even
would.
go to social and do a social search?
No, I'm gonna show up. Truly show up with curiosity.
Oh, you mean from an advisor standpoint.
Just from a, it's really rare that I do any research ahead of talking to somebody.
But if someone were to say, hey, like you're looking for a new barber or chiropractor, and they give you a name, hey, this guy was really good. Or would you do any kind of research, whether it's their website reviews, social, any kind of look them up?
I'm a maybe on that one. I know it's wrong.
Really?
Yeah, so maybe I'm
Probably
not that.
depends on the referral source.
I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Because I got my buddy Jake referred me to Dr. Risk for as a chiropractor, and I just 100% trust Jake. So zero research on that, but I'm looking for a new functional doctor, and I'm doing a ton of research on that. And
Okay.
so I feel it's also what's the level of needs. So going back to that, you feel like loan officers or real estate agents or whoever it is, they're not doing enough research ahead of their
Some
conversation.
of it is if the agent refers you a client that you know is a first-time home buyer who's currently living with mom and dad, and that's all the information maybe you have, then obviously your conversation and the scripts of the conversation, I would think, would be more geared towards someone who has no clue how this process works. And so, what are the questions that if you slow the process down, what are some curious questions you could ask them to help build some of that empathy, but also trust with them early on, where they can feel safe to be like, okay, I don't understand what that means. I don't know what all my options are. I don't even know if I can qualify. I just know I'm tired of living with mom and dad versus someone
So,
who may be like a real estate investor or this is their sixth time to buy or sell. It's going to be a different conversation.
but so going back to the question, so are you going to look up that first time home buyer on social before you call
No,
them?
no.
Okay. Because that's where I feel like that's part of the call reluctance I find is it's also call procrastination by, oh, I better look this person up or I better
But
see
what
if
if
this
I'm
real.
calling an agent to prospect the agent? I'm going to try to figure out what they value, who they work for, what things do they typically like or comment on? Are they even on social? Try to learn a little bit about them that way.
You can look up their numbers and see what their numbers are.
Yes, 100%. Because I wouldn't be calling them unless I knew that.
Yeah, and I can argue both sides of that, right? I can't say that I've never done that research. And so let's go down both paths. So going back to the first time home buyer, I think if you show up with curiosity and enthusiasm so that, hey, I'm super excited to help you. Hey, tell me what's going on, right? I think it's tell me the story kind of thing. Jeremy Forcier said at the Modern Mortgage Summit, tell me that your story, the whole story, and then just shut up and let them tell you. Because I feel if you give the person the opportunity to speak versus feel like they're being quizzed. Have you bought a house before? Oh, what was that? What are you paying rent? What do you want for a mortgage? Where are you looking? What's your price point? What's your down payment? We show up with this script and then they're like, oh my gosh, they feel attacked versus if you let them actually tell their story, oh gosh, you know what? Deborah's really interested in me and hearing what I have to say.
And I think that's not typically where I see the call reluctance. The call reluctance usually comes from the post closing database calls or the prospecting partners to either drive traffic to an event that you're doing or because you're trying to acquire more partnerships. But if it's a referral or lead call, I don't feel like people have as much difficulty with those conversations. Do you agree or disagree?
I think if it's a lead call, people have less call reluctance because that's what your job is and they're doing that and they know what they're walking into. I feel like they could do a better job of communicating there, right? So that the person feels heard versus felt talked to. But I agree every other conversation. And that's why I think that's where the confidence matters. The reason that I'm less likely, if I'm referred a real estate agent today that someone says, hey, this person's looking for a new team to work with, Todd, will you call them? It's going to sound really weird. I'm not going to look them up. But I agree with you that a best practice is for someone to look them up and get some context. I'm not going to look them up because I'm truly going to show up with curiosity and ask them a lot of questions. I think the reason that most people need to look them up is because you're not going to show up with curiosity. And so you better know more about them to know which way to go. What are your thoughts on that?
I like how you framed that with if someone says that they're looking for a new team to work with, my brain at the start of this went to cold calling, and I just was of the type that never cold called because I would warm them up through social by liking and commenting on their content so that they could see my name. So when I did make the call, it was a little bit warmer because I could leverage the fact that we had interacted on social media.
I think that's super smart. I think I don't know if you were on the call, but this was probably, gosh, been maybe 2 years or more. We had Keith Collins on who moved to Tennessee from California, and he did a really good job of targeting agents where he made you would know the official word for it, but so whatever. He had it. So when he showed a video, it went to certain people. I don't know what that's called, but he followed the agents he wanted to get to know. And then he had videos that would play to those people more than everybody else. And then he said he called one of these big agents and they're like, gosh, it's about time he called me because he had been commenting and doing the things that you're talking about.
And hopefully, and I know he has shared this publicly. So he was our client. And when he first made the move, he was the typical advisor that was looking at the wrong scoreboard when it came to social. And that's what really drove him to us is he was like, man, I'm doing all this work and I paid for these professional editors and content creators that then distribute the content. And I'm just not getting the likes and follows. And so we just flipped the script and we showed him how you can set up a favorites feed and how you can set up custom lists. And he learned really quickly the value of now, this only works when you then make the outreach. That's part of creating your brand and your social content is so that when you do make that outreach, the agent's already seen your name, heard of you, or if say you go to a networking event and you feel like you hit it off really well, like most top performing real estate agents are going to then spot check you and see, okay, is this person serious about their business and running it as a business? Because if they're not online, what does that say for my clients when I refer it to this advisor? If they can't find anything on them, that's not going to help the conversion. So he learned to switch the scoreboard and not look at just likes and engagement and more on what are the affinity partners that I'm getting in front of because of leveraging my credibility that's now on digital media. So I'm super proud of him.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that's what you teach people. I think it's such a great service. And I'm on the fence. So I want to go down that path, but I also want to kind of circle back to
Yeah.
our communication piece. So
Yeah.
we talked about, we started this off of it's not what you say, it's what people hear. And so let's go back to that. What do we need to make sure that we do here today to put a bow on that in this show so that we said you got to show up with curiosity. You said, hey, it doesn't hurt to do some research so you know who you're talking to keep it on there. I said, let's ask some questions to get them at ease and to feel like they understand that I'm interested in them. What are we missing in this conversation?
The nonverbal cues, so eye contact, making sure you have good lighting, clear audio, that you have curious tone, so your tone of voice based off when someone does respond, like maybe this is their first person in their family to ever become a homeowner. Do you stop and pause and acknowledge and even extend off of what that person says before you go to the next question? As obvious as it may seem, it's just to be a great communicator, you also have to be a great listener and add on to the things that they share so that it shows that you're curious and you're interested in them, not just for the transaction and the financial benefit. But I think we sometimes undervalue the nonverbal things. If I were just looking at my phone, or if I'm distracted on email while I'm on a call, which you can hear people typing. Have you ever been on a call where like, you hear someone's either tapping on their phone or they're on a computer? Now they could be taking notes. It would be important to then just state, hey, do you mind if I either record this call so that I can do a recap notes for the team? Or do you mind if I take notes on my computer? You may hear some typing, but no, it's not me going through emails. It's taking notes on your dreams and goals, let's say. But if you don't make those small little statements to let them know, they could feel like you're distracted.
I think that's huge, right? Because you were saying make eye contact, and the first thing I thought about is, gosh, I haven't even got this person on Zoom yet. So, or I haven't gotten to a meeting. I'm actually on the phone with them, and yeah, we do hear that, right? Click, 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 especially these fast typers, and people are like, "Oh, that's really weird." Deborah's replying to an email, and so I do think it's smart to always tell people, "Hey, real quick, I'm just going to take a quick note on that, so that they know you're not sending an email off to a friend." And so I do think you're right. The nonverbal stuff matters. And I think part of that too is, yeah, oh, interesting. Oh, awesome. Yeah. It's also making those little comments along the way so that they realize you are there. I was on the phone the other day with Dave Savage, common thing that we'll be on the phone. He's like, what was filling me in on something. So it was a longer, hey, real quick, let me just fill you in on this thing. And he's like, "You still there?" Because again, I was quiet on my end. I was just listening, right? I was intently listening, but I should have said, oh, interesting, right? Like I didn't make any other comments. And so I think that's a really good point. One of the things that you said to me is, how do people self-assess? So on all this stuff, how do we get, one is we're going to get better. So I think if we listen to all the points that we've made, I think someone can get better. And then how do you think they self-assess?
Because at the start of this, you said how people show up and how much confidence you have when you show up. And I had asked you, okay, so then how do you measure confidence and how do you measure curiosity? And how do you then poke holes in, am I truly showing up? Is it confidence? Is it arrogance? Is it ignorance? It could be all of, there's a fine line between all of them. I think in order to grow confidence, it comes from doing the work. It's taking consistent action so that if you were put on the spot, this is why if you and I were put on any podcast or on any stage, and if you were asked about productivity or I was asked about marketing or social, there's not, I'm constantly studying it where I would feel confident. I could go out there and I know I could deliver on whatever topic they had asked that I speak about. And that comes from repetition of doing action every day, studying your trade so that you're never caught off guard.
The work before the work. I think that's the bottom line. The bottom line
It's
is if
not
you,
sexy. Nobody wants to hear it's taking action, Todd.
I think that's it though, right? I feel like my call reluctance is low. Even if someone's like, this person's an amazing, the top real estate agent in this state, like my call reluctance is low because I've done it so many times and I'm very comfortable in my failures, right? I've gotten this point because I've been told no so many times. I've gotten to this point because I've had a lot of people say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I've gotten to this point because I've made the calls where nobody answered and left the voicemails and nobody's called back, and I have thick skin from it. And I think that that's where people just get hurt because they think everything is going to go, should go exactly the way it's supposed to go in a fairy tale. And in the end, I think if you've done it and you've been kicked in the teeth and you've had the success, then, and you feel like you're an expert, then you can just show up and get up and stand up and do your thing again and again. And then that lowers that bar of call reluctance.
Like that. That then goes to self-awareness. Like, do you have the humility and no ego that stops you from being imperfect? And some days being your best that day may not be your best, but it's the best that day. And I think you're right. A lot of times we have that call reluctance because we fear and make these stories in our head of like the worst case scenario of what could happen. But something I would always ask myself is if that thing happened, whatever the worst case scenario could be, could I recover from it? Is that what is the worst that could happen? But then to flip it on you, Todd, what if someone is desperate? They need deals or they're going to be cut from their company. They know they have fumbled and maybe they screwed up some closings with some, so they're having to rebuild their reputation and they almost have like commission breath when they're calling. Is there any way to self-assess if you're coming across desperate or pushy or salesy?
I think it's always take a deep breath, right? Take a deep breath before you get on that next call. Last week's failure is last week's failure, right? There's nothing you can do there. And I hate to say it, if I had a bad closing last week for something that was or wasn't my fault, not like the world knows. It wasn't on the 6 o'clock news, right? People I know, so it's a dent to my confidence, but the next person that I'm going to talk to has no freaking clue. Right. And so if I'm desperate for the next deal, I just gotta, hate to say it, I gotta pick up the phone and just do the work. I gotta figure out. So that's a whole nother conversation of who to call and what to call. But you and I know that's going to be prospecting. It's going to be prospecting and again, it's what's the next most likely to transact in my world. It's probably a lead that I got that I haven't gotten an application from. It's probably an application I got that I haven't gotten a pre-qual issued. It's the pre-qual person that I pre-qualled a month ago and haven't talked to since because I've been so busy dealing with that deal that was going sideways. And be starting there and then be looking at the realtors, even the realtors and all these other transactions. I'd even call the realtor in the bad transaction. Hey, you know what? That was really ugly and I wanted to apologize, but I would love to get your feedback on it. What do you feel like I did really well? And what do you feel like I really sucked at? Because again, it's going to sound really weird. That person may be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how humble that person is to call me, and maybe you get another shot. But worst case is you get some good feedback on it. But in the end, you're probably not going to benefit from trying to call the top 10 realtors in your area that don't work with you today, because that's a longer time thing. If I got a short-term challenge, I got to deal with short-term opportunities versus long-term opportunities. And then once I get all those done, yeah, you can filter in one or two of those because you're trying to plant those future seeds too.
Do you suggest recording calls and watching game film on your, and even measuring like talk time, like how much you talk versus they talk? What are your thoughts on that?
It's funny, it's not something I've ever done consistently, but I do feel like there's great opportunity in that right now. And number one is you can't record someone's call without actually telling them you're recording it. What I love is that I've been recording calls. So I've been doing that myself, and it's good. I think it shows humility that I'm willing to continue to learn after 25 years of talking to these same types of conversations. I feel like that conversation has evolved and I'm trying to get better at it. I haven't measured the talk time in there, but I always have to imagine, no different than on these podcasts, I probably talk more than I should. And so that's probably good. But I do feel like if you've got someone who's willing to listen to you, and I'm sure, I don't want to spark the AI debate, but I'm sure there's great ways to ask AI to evaluate a conversation using frameworks that you could build.
And even just assessing, okay, these were the curious questions that I had laid out prior to the call that maybe I knew would be strategic questions because it's a first-time home seller or first-time home buyer. But then how did you actually ask them in the conversation? Was it the appropriate time? Because it's for people to remember what you hear. It's not just the how you deliver it, but then also when you're saying it, which is a lot of what we teach in the Exactly What to Say certifications that we run. Is we get so focused on the what and we lose sight on how and when. And I can't remember whose quote this is, but I had heard the more you get the other person to talk, the more they'll consider you a genius. Have you heard that quote before?
I've heard some along that, right? I did my radio show for 5 years, right? So I had over 250 episodes, and I always felt that the less I talked, the better the episode was. But really what happened is that the real estate agent on the other side felt way better about it because they were talking, they got to tell their story, they got to be their person. And I don't think it's any different when you're working with a client. You're an expert, you've got to tell them these certain things in this pre-purchase buyer consultation if you're a real estate agent, so you can get them to sign your buyer broker agreement that you need them to sign. But you need to allow them to say their voice. And the easiest example I can think of where people have messed up lately is the whole idea of someone who's owned a home before. You alluded to it earlier. Just because someone bought a home doesn't mean that they're an expert. What they forget is they bought a home 20 years ago, they sold it 12 years ago, and they haven't owned a home since. And ironically, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac consider them a first-time home buyer all over again, right? They haven't owned a home in 3 years. And so I think we forget the fact that we have this curse of knowledge, and our curse of knowledge is what gets in our way.
Okay, so to put a bow on this, in order for people to take action and win now, what would be your one action item you would challenge everyone with today?
My action item would be to block time to put in the work to make the calls, but I want you to block time on both ends of it. I want you to block time to make the calls. I want you to be more curious while you're on those calls, but I actually want you to bookend it with just 5 minutes at the end and self-assess. How did I do? What did I ask? Did I listen more than I talked? Did I ask good questions? What could I do different? Before you just jump into the next thing, make sure that you're thinking about what it is that you can do better next time. But if you don't block the time to do it, then it's just an afterthought and it's going to be half-assed.
I love it. It's great.
All right, what's your action plan for the crew?
I would say before you ever go to give advice, make sure you've asked 3 questions because the best advisors usually give the least amount of advice. So make that your new habit. Before you just immediately answer a question, sometimes it requires more qualification of the question, which allows you to make deeper connection before you go straight into assuming maybe what you think they're asking. Because a lot of times we have like vocabulary differences where they may ask this and we think they mean this because of what it means in our world, but it's not what they meant. So try to apply this with your personal life, professional life. Just before you go to give advice, ask 3 more questions.
I love it. So this episode, we covered a lot of ground. I feel like there's lots of nuggets in this episode, more than usual, a little longer episode than usual. It was a lot of fun for me. I think you did a great job, Deborah.
Thank you. And now all you guys have to do is win now.
All right, see you next week.